The account in our first reading from the Acts of the Apostles in that imprisonment of St. Peter and his eventual rescue by God through the angel is very powerful, very moving, and oftentimes I think one of those underrated or overlooked passages of rescue by God in the New Testament. And it is very clear here that Peter is arrested on the Feast of Unleavened Bread, and he is intended to be brought before the people for his trial, his execution after Passover. So this context matters. This context is important because this is very similar to what happened to Jesus himself, that he is that Passover sacrifice, that perfect sacrifice of the Passover. He was arrested around that time. He was tried around that time. He was executed around that same time. And I imagine that Peter, at his arrest, thought he was going to be going through the same thing that his Lord did, that he was going to face the same experience, a trial and an execution. And in the midst of that, as he was likely anticipating that fate, the angel comes into his prison, where he is bound by chains, where the door is locked. And again, that should remind you perhaps of another prison of the Lord, where after his execution, he was bound and placed into a locked room, into his tomb. Peter is, in many ways, in that symbolic aspect, in a tomb. He is dead in a spiritual sense, in a real analogy to how he is to experience for himself the resurrection in a new way, because he is rescued from death. He is brought out by that hand of God from death, from prison itself, experiencing in himself an analogy to what Christ experienced. And this is, in the New Testament, perhaps the closest analogy we can get to what it might have been like at the tomb on that Easter morning, about what that might have looked like, because we get no other accounts of the resurrection of Jesus. But we get this connection, this analogy, this symbolism of St. Peter going through something almost exactly the same. And it can lead us to understand Peter himself as that vicar of Christ, going through what he did and experiencing for himself that reality that in Christ we have freedom, that rescue from death, from sin, and from all its destructive forces. And yes, it is true that Peter is later martyred in the city of Rome, that Paul is martyred as well. We celebrate this day the apostles, these martyrs, that as he experienced that rescue from death, from his own execution once, to know that life and that power of God, to know the reality of the resurrection, so he also experienced in himself that martyrdom, giving his life as witness, to be the seeds, let his blood be that seed which plants the faith in the hearts of so many others. Today, on this solemnity, we rejoice in these great saints, St. Peter and St. Paul. We are to acknowledge the realities of their life. We are to see them in that new light. And as Peter had his eyes open to what God was doing, so through their intercessions, might continue to open our eyes of faith to see God at work in our life, to recognize that reality of the resurrection, how it has changed history, how has it changed us, and how we are called too to go forward and be faithful witnesses, faithful martyrs to the faith, to Jesus Christ. And that with the apostles, with St. Peter and St. Paul, we might be one in union, one in faith, one in the church, one in Jesus Christ.